Shan, we are live.
Good evening to one and all. I am Shan Chaudhary, and I've been working as a research scholar for Red Lantern Analytica. Now, Red Lantern Analytica is an international affairs observer group based out of New Delhi, India. It focuses on critical issues related to China with a special focus on Sino-Indian relations. The main aim of our organization is to draw in India's foremost academic institutions and security intelligentsia, corporate institutions, monetary establishments, and experts in discussion on India's foreign policy and extend the country's role in global issues. The moderator for today is Ms. Sreyoshi Sinha, who is a research associate with RLA, and I will pass on the baton to her to keep the webinar moving forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shan. Good evening, everybody, especially our honorable guest, Dr. Jagannath Panda. So today we will be dealing with the topic, is expansion, why is expansion of AUKUS not inevitable? So I'll just give a brief introduction and hand over the entire stage to our honorable guest. So basically AUKUS, the security partnership between Australia, United Kingdom and the United States, announced on September 16th, is a landmark coalition for many reasons. For one, in the aftermath of the Afghan drought, it is a powerful signal from the United States that it is still in the game as the most important world power, that it is not withdrawing into a domestic shell, and that the traditional Anglo-Saxon alliance that has fought several wars on the same side for over 100 years is in robust health. AUKUS joins the UNZUS and Five Eyes to other security alliances in the Indo-Pacific. Secondly, with the agreement for the transfer of nuclear power submarines, different from nuclear armed submarines, that has to be kept in mind, to Australia, this alliance, quite unlike of the Quad, is a clearly stated security military alliance in the Indo-Pacific. Three, like the Quad, AUKUS is aimed at protecting the partner's strategic interest in a region that spans 2 oceans and 38 countries, where China's ambitions and assertiveness are challenging the existing status quo. Fourthly, it marks a new low in Australia-China relations, and the ripples of this will be felt across the region. But how far will this new deal help the three countries play an important role in the Indo-Pacific region and ensure a peaceful and rules-based international order remains to be seen. To enlighten us more on this critical issue, we have with us today a very eminent expert, Dr. Jagannath Panda, who is a research fellow and center head for East Asia at the Manohar Parrikar Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis, which is also known as MPIDSA, New Delhi, India. He is the series editor for Routledge Studies on Think Asia. Dr. Panda is the author of the book India-China Relations, Politics of Resources, Identity, and Authority in a Multipolar World Order, which had been published by Routledge in 2017. He is also the author of the book China's Path to Power, Party, Military, and the Politics of State Transition by Pentagon Press in 2010. Dr. Panda has also edited a number of books to his credit. Most recently, he has published an edited volume, Scaling India-Japan Cooperation in Indo-Pacific and Beyond 2025, Connectivity, Corridors and Contours by Knowledge World Publishing Limited 2019, and The Korean Peninsula and Indo-Pacific Power Politics, Status, Security at Stake by Routledge in 2020. Sir, we are most honored and really obliged to have you as our honorable speaker, and we might commit many unintentional errors in the process. So I'm seeking pardon and forgiveness from beforehand only. I just transfer the stage to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Saraswati. Thank you, San, for that kind introduction. Am I audible clearly?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let me thank Red Lantern Analytica for this kind invitation. It's a pleasure to be here and discuss with one of the most burning topic in Indo-Pacific currently, that is the AUKUS. As you could see that, AUKUS has been in news for nearly, for a couple of months. And a lot of discussion is about AUKUS, that what it is tries to achieve in the regions and how is it really going to deny the Chinese the opportunity the Chinese were aiming to gain in the regions, and whether there is a scope for AUKUS to get expanded in the region of Indo-Pacific. So let me actually touch upon some of these issues. First, I'll address the point what is really AUKUS is all about. The second point, I think, during the discussion, I would like to highlight is about how AUKUS has actually impacted the transatlantic ties, and it has impacted the EU, and how EU is going to respond in times to come. The third point I would be addressing is that AUKUS and its impact on the Quad formulations, on the Quad process. As we know that Quad is one of those most significant grouping in the Indo-Pacific regions. And the fourth point, I'll come into the expansion of the AUKUS, if there is a scope for expansion. I don't really see that AUKUS is getting expanded in near future, but then there is a debate emerging whether AUKUS is really going to expand. So let me touch upon some of these issues. I'll start with that primary point, that what is AUKUS all about? How should we see AUKUS, whether it's just a minilateral groupings, trilateral groupings in Indo-Pacific, or more than that? And I think essentially, on a face value, one can say that this is a trilateral, formulations, or among Australia, among UK, among US, and this is one of those trilateral, adding into the volumes of trilaterals we have in Indo-Pacific regions. So we can essentially see it as a trilateral, adding into the minilateral groupings that the Indo-Pacific regions is already having, be it in the Quad formulation, be it in the AUKUS formulation, be it in the 5-5 formulation. But I think when we're talking about AUKUS, there is definitely more than that trilateral. And I think primarily it is a trilateral security partnership having serious defense components attached to it. And I think that is one critical component of AUKUS. AUKUS is just not a trilateral. It is more than that, and it is deals with a deeper integration of security and defense related science and technological pact. It also talks about cooperation in the field of industrial basis. It talks about cooperation, to take forward the supply chain networks. So therefore, essentially, AUKUS is more than a trilateral. On the other side, I think AUKUS brings three prominent power in the Indo-Pacific together that the world simply cannot, try to sideline it. Of course, it brings, as you pointed out, Sayusi, that it brings the US, Indo-Pacific policy and its Pacific plan outlets into the focus. So US is already there. Then it brings UK, United Kingdom, which has actually, making an inroad to Indo-Pacific after making, its departure from European Union. So after the Brexit, UK is Britain is coming to in Indo-Pacific in a new form. The third element here is about Australia. Australia getting empowered by this trilateral. And I think Australia, through this trilateral, will be empowered to possess sensitive technology, nuclear submarine technologies, if not in terms of weaponizing the technologies, but in terms of having the capability. And I think that is itself talking about a lot about the AUKUS. And these distinct features about US, about UK, and about Australia makes AUKUS the most dynamic trilateral partnership in Indo-Pacific. And I think when we go beyond that, what we see that I think there are a lot of other things attached to the cause. One is the strategic necessity of AUKUS. And I think that makes also AUKUS a distinct grouping in the regions. What we see is that AUKUS is happening, and AUKUS has come up as a trilateral when President Biden has actually made a departure from Afghanistan, and then trying to refocus into the Indo-Pacific regions. So in a way, it talks about America's replanning in the regions. It talks about America's global outreach in the Indo-Pacific regions, and talks about America's military planning, maritime planning in the regions. The second aspect, what we need to note about AUKUS is about the nuclear dimension. And I think this trilateral has happened at a time when probably not all the Indo-Pacific countries that AUKUS would like to cooperate on, let's say India, let's say Japan, they're not really open to the nuclear debates. So AUKUS, in a way, is promoting a kind of a culture, in a kind of arms race culture, a kind of a nuclear culture in Indo-Pacific, that many Indo-Pacific countries or associated countries, those who are with the AUKUS, or particularly with the US, let's say the Quad countries like India and Japan, they're not really familiar with the nuclear debates. They're not really familiar with the, the arms race cultures that the Indo-Pacific regions has to face in times to come. So in that context, AUKUS offers us something new to think. And more than that, I think what we need to also take into account when we're talking about AUKUS is the technological gap that is there in the regions. And we know for a fact, all the three countries, United Kingdom, United States, and Australia, they are technologically pro countries, they are technologically superior countries. So they, having this trilateral in Indo-Pacific, is trying to set an example that the politics in the Indo-Pacific is going to be more technologically driven. The other point that needs to be understood here is that I think AUKUS has happened with a deliberate plan by three members when they have chosen to make a departure from Europe, or to make a departure from their association with the France, because the way AUKUS happened, without the knowledge of France, and as France in the Paris called it a backstab. It talks that it talks about a politics that all the three countries, United States, United Kingdom, and Australia, they want to focus more on the Indo-Pacific, and they want to narrow the politics of the technologically driven politics that the Indo-Pacific region has to live with. So that means what we are going to see a kind of a more nuanced understanding, a more collaborative understanding, a more pointed understanding among US, UK, and Australia on the technological issues, on the military issues, on the maritime issues. And therefore, I think there are reasons to think about whether to what extent these issues can actually be beneficial to countries like India, can be beneficial to countries in the Indo-Pacific regions. And I think to that extent, we need to really understand whether from India's point of view, AUKUS is a welcome initiative or not, and to what extent countries in the Indo-Pacific regions like Japan would welcome AUKUS or not, and to what extent other countries in the regions should look at AUKUS, whether they should welcome, they should see it as a positive development, or they should not necessarily see it as a positive development. And I think these are some of the critical issues that will lead us to judge and come to a conclusion whether we should be talking about AUKUS expansion or not. I think the first point that we need to really talk about is the military dimension of AUKUS. As we know for a fact, that AUKUS is a trilateral agreement among the countries who are committed to share technologies, who are committed to share defense equipments, military equipments, maritime equipments. And to that effect, I think the AUKUS is not really going to be expanded in near future. They are not really going to engage with a collaborative ventures with any other countries. They would strictly be making it very much trilateral at this moment. Now that leads to us to ask, what about the other countries? What about the other world countries like India and Japan, who enjoy some kind of a kind of a closer security partnership with the US? And both India and Japan have a much more cordial relationship with United Kingdom and Australia. So what about India and Japan? Whether they would be really consulted by the AUKUS countries, and at some stage, if AUKUS is getting expanded, to what extent India and Japan will be considered to be clubbed under the AUKUS formulations. And I think we need to distinguish here to understand the politics behind AUKUS. And I think each one of us, we are well aware that when something of this nature is happening, the kind of agreement that the AUKUS agreement happened, it has to be absolutely confidential, and absolutely it has to be a closed door affair. And therefore, there were reasons for France and many European countries to react to the AUKUS agreement. We have seen the way actually France reacted to the situation by saying that it was a backstab. So to that extent, I think I'm not really sure whether India and Japan should draw positivity. But I think there are reasons for India and Japan to draw positivity out of the AUKUS, primarily because I believe that I think when the AUKUS agreement was happening, both India and Japan has been given enough signal about that something of this nature is going to happen in the regions. Even though India and Japan were caught in surprise that the kind of agreement happened and the way France was treated, and definitely India has reasons to not only get surprised, but India were reasons to get upset because in such kind of cases there are reasons for India to worry because India is not a signatory to NPT, and there might be at some stage pressure on India to sign the nuclear agreement or to sign NPT and to be with the AUKUS power to avail such kind of sensitive technologies. But I think what we see here is a much more closed door understanding among the AUKUS countries to say and give a signal to India and Japan, but at the same time not to share everything. And therefore, I would say that given the kind of reaction we saw in Delhi and the kind of reaction we saw in Tokyo, that means Delhi and Tokyo Delhi and Tokyo were not really caught in surprise. Delhi and Tokyo were caught in a very doubtful situation how to react to the situation, but at the same time they knew that something of this nature might arrive, or something of this nature is already going to happen in the Indo-Pacific regions, because in the Quad formulations there have been enough discussion about technologies, about defense cooperation, about military cooperation, about maritime cooperation. So I think to some extent India and Japan were aware of the situation, that AUKUS is here emerging, and the AUKUS agreement is a welcome initiative to their Indo-Pacific planning, and therefore, India and Japan does not have enough reasons to worry about. The second aspect that needs to be looked at from AUKUS is about the supply chain, the climate change, the maritime issues, the economic cooperations, and particularly the military cooperations. To what extent all of these issues are welcome signals for India and Japan, and to what extent all of these issues that AUKUS is going to address. Because as I mentioned, AUKUS is not really a defense pact simply. It is much more than that. It is not just a trilateral partnership. It is with a bigger plan. And I think to that extent, both India and Japan will welcome AUKUS agreement, and most of the Indo-Pacific countries who are believing in rules-based order, they should welcome AUKUS. But at the same time, there are reasons to be worried about AUKUS, because AUKUS is more about the developed economies, about the industrialized economies, about the countries, those who shares closer affinity among the Five Eyes formulations. So to that extent, I think many countries, many middle-ranked economies, many smaller economies in the Indo-Pacific regions might not really be convenient with AUKUS, because AUKUS is a powerful trilateral. And to that effect, the smaller countries, the middle-ranked economies, they will find it a little clueless how to engage with AUKUS, unless AUKUS extend an invitation to them to stay as a dialogue partner and to engage with them as a dialogue partner. I don't really see a room for middle-ranked economies or smaller economies, smaller countries to stay engaged with AUKUS. But here, I think both India and Japan has to distinguish themselves. The case of India and Japan, and I repeatedly mention here, India and Japan, the case of India and Japan is somewhat exclusive. There are rooms for India and Japan to collaborate with AUKUS. And how to collaborate with AUKUS? On the supply chain resilience initiative, we know for a fact that India, Japan, and Australia are talking about supply chain resilience initiative for a long time. In fact, last year there was an agreement, and there has been periodic meetings happening about the how to form, how to process a new supply chain chain of networks in the Indo-Pacific regions. Thinking away from China. We know for a fact that when we're talking about trade and investment linkages in Indo-Pacific, it is much more China-centric. So India and Japan, Australia are talking about supply chain initiative, alternative supply chain initiatives for a long time. And to that extent, engaging with AUKUS, engaging with UK would be a welcome initiative. Let's talk about maritime economy or maritime, cooperation in the region. And I think India and Japan are the two mainstream countries in the Indo-Pacific regions that are actually talking about maritime stability, maritime security for a long time. And I think to that extent, AUKUS is a welcome initiative. And I think there are rooms to engage. There are rooms for expansion. There are rooms for more dialogue among the Quad countries between India and Japan, and on the other hand, the AUKUS countries involving UK. If we talk about in more specific terms, let's talk about military and security issues. And I think on the military and security issues, what AUKUS is going to do is that to open more avenues for more defense-oriented cooperation. We know for a fact that between India and Japan, we have now an AXA agreement. So similar kind of agreement might happen between India and UK, between India and Australia, between Japan and UK, Japan and Australia. So I think to that extent, AUKUS will be seen as a positive development for India and Japan, probably not for so many other countries in the regions. Now, there are other critical sides of the AUKUS that we need to discuss. And I think I'm just sharing my thoughts because I think it is important to share my thoughts rather than to read a script or to make a PowerPoint presentation, because some of these issues are constantly evolving and we need to take it on the merit of the issue. We should be discussing rather than, trying to read what the statement, official statement, and what the officials in the respective AUKUS countries are talking about. And I think one other critical dimension we need to talk about, to what extent AUKUS can provide security to the regions. And therefore, there are critical security issues in the regions that we need to talk about. One is the Afghanistan issue or the Taliban issue. The second one is the Taiwan issue. The third one is the South China Sea. Fourth, maybe East China Sea. Fifth is India-China boundary issue, dispute. And there are many other issues. But I think these are the 3-4 main issues that we need to talk about. To what extent AUKUS can come as a backup security provider. And I think when it comes to the Afghanistan issue, as we started discussing about it, that I think the Americans withdrawing from the Afghanistan does not necessarily mean that they do not have an eye on Afghanistan. And I think if we look at the US planning, they're very much engaged with with Taliban. They are very much engaged with the Afghanistan regions. So so we can say that the Americans are still very much there, even though they don't have a that much soldier presence or a military presence in Afghanistan at this moment. So it's all about intelligence network. It's all about intelligence sharing. So I think to that extent, India should welcome the development of AUKUS, because AUKUS is among the three big economies who have interest in the Middle East regions, and particularly in the Afghanistan. We know Australia have investments in Afghanistan. We know UK has investment plans, and they have invested widely in Afghanistan. And US was always there in the Afghanistan regions. So to that extent, it is a positive development that AUKUS is there, at least to share intelligence and talk about more about how to talk about sensitive security threats. Let's say about the issue of terrorism, about the issue of radical, Islamist outfits in the regions, about Al Qaeda networks, about Haqqani networks, and I think to that extent, AUKUS will be very beneficial in terms of having intelligence sharing platform. So there is a scope between AUKUS and Quad to cooperate, and AUKUS and India, AUKUS and Japan to cooperate and share information on some of these critical issues pertaining to Afghanistan. What about Taiwan? And I think Taiwan issue is one of those critical issues that AUKUS would actually be very beneficial. Of course, we in India might not really be that much focused on the Taiwan issue, but in coming time, and I think we have to get serious about the Taiwan issue, because PLA occupying Taiwan is not necessarily a positive development for India. And I think the kind of military adventurism we see from the Chinese, from the PLA, on the India-China boundary issue, on the India-China boundary dispute and other issues, I think India needs to be on its guard on the Taiwan issue too. And I think therefore, even though India does not have a stated position on the Taiwan issue, how to respond to the situation, I think we need to really prepare for the future. PLA occupying Taiwan would actually bring China as a stronger maritime power closer to Indians' coastal regions. And therefore, at some point, India needs to take Taiwan issue much more seriously. And of course, AUKUS has a point to discuss about the Taiwan issue, because the submarine that Australia will give, and the submarine launch in the Indo-Pacific regions or in the Indian Ocean regions, that could obviously provide security to Taiwan. So therefore, Taiwan has all the reasons to be happy about AUKUS. Japan would be also delighted to have AUKUS, primarily because of the Taiwan issue, because if PLA occupies Taiwan, then it will actually expose also Japan's security problems. So therefore, Japan has reasons to be happy. And so much also the case for India, because PLA occupying Taiwan would also be a grave danger to India's coastal regions and India's coastal defense planning. So therefore, Taiwan is a critical issue for AUKUS, and AUKUS coming into the regions is a welcome development. What about South China Sea and East China Sea? I don't think India is really concerned about the East China Sea dispute that much, but yes, India is concerned about the South China Sea, because we have a large interest. We have a huge interest about trade and energy exploration in South China Sea zone, and the way the Chinese are responding, the way the the COC will be dealt with by the Chinese and the ASEAN countries, and the way the Chinese are objecting to our oil exploration, be it with the Vietnamese farms, oil companies, or the other Southeast Asian oil companies. I think it's a great setback to our planning in the regions. So we need to also look in futuristic sense. We need to also see to what extent India can actually take advantage by being with the AUKUS countries in terms of its engagement with the South China Sea. And I think at some point, if not tomorrow, maybe at some point, I think the region has to deal with the Chinese maritime adventurism. And to that extent, India will face the heat because we have a large commercial interest in the South China Sea zones. And we were already for last 10 years, we were in oil exploration adventure with the Vietnam, with the Petro Vietnam, and with various other Vietnamese companies. So at some stage, we have to talk to the AUKUS countries in terms of providing security. And I think having oil exploration, having a backup plan is always a welcome initiative, and we should welcome AUKUS to that effect. There are also other critical issues, but I think to India's point of view, one critical issue that we need to ask, what extent AUKUS is beneficial for India when it comes to the India-China boundary dispute? I think fundamentally speaking, we cannot ask AUKUS or AUKUS countries to interfere on the India-China boundary dispute. And I think if we don't allow to do that, that will be beneficial for India, primarily because we would like to keep India-China boundary dispute as a bilateral one. That is in the interest of India and also to some extent in the interest of China. But I think what we need to keep it in mind is that we would be needing the AUKUS help in terms of providing us the satellite imagery of the Chinese troops, the intelligence sharing inputs about China, and also about monitoring about China's naval planning in the Indian Ocean regions. Even though we know for a fact that the PLA's military restructuring has gone to the next level across the India-China boundary regions, and we know that the Tibetan Plateau command of the Tibetan command of the PLA is witness carrying out a lot of adventurism in the Himalayan valley. But I think we need to be guarded not only on the China front, on the Pakistan front, but also on the maritime front. So I would say, in fact, I've been talking about this for a long time. We will be well prepared if we think about not only a dual front attack, but also a 3-point challenges, tripartite challenges, one from China, one from Pakistan, and one from the maritime angle. And I think that is what the AUKUS can be beneficial to India in terms of sharing intelligence, in terms of sharing, continuous vigilance from the cyberspace in order to monitor the PLA's activities and also PLA Navy's activities. We know for a fact that last 10 years, the PLA Navy is making constant adventure to the Indian Ocean region. So it is important for India to keep a vigilant eye on the PLA, on the land border activities, on the land border regions, also on the maritime domains. So to that extent, AUKUS is a welcome initiative and we need to see it in a positive development. But at the same time, as I mentioned, that we need to also be vigilant that AUKUS countries, particularly US, should not force upon us to sign the NPT at this moment and also to agree with them on a range of technological sensitive issues without really allowing India to possess those sensitive or critical technologies. And I think the last point that I would touch upon is the infrastructure politics or the connectivity of the infrastructural part that the AUKUS countries will be addressing. And I think what we saw in the AUKUS agreement is a kind of a agreement to take forward infrastructure development in the Indo-Pacific regions. There are greater initiatives that the region is witnessing, be it Blue Dot networks, be it the B3W initiatives, that is the built better back world initiatives that the US is talking about. In fact, if you see, just a couple of days back, there was a news items, and currently the debate is on among the US circuit that the US Congress is talking about to pass the bill about infrastructural financing, planning, and that is the B3W initiatives. So I think there are a lot of infrastructural initiatives we are talking about in the Indo-Pacific regions that India should take a serious note about. Now, what AUKUS countries can offer to India in terms of infrastructural development. One is to the platform to engage with. I mean, there is already one platform, that is the BDN platform. That is the platform between US, Japan, and Australia. India has agreed to support the BDN platform, but India has not agreed to be a part of the BDN. So there is a difference that we are going to support the BDN without really signing the agreement. So therefore, to that extent, AUKUS can be beneficial because we are also talking about a lot of infrastructural cooperation with UK, with the United Kingdom. So we can talk about, building maritime ports. We are talking about, refashioning or revitalizing our maritime infrastructure, about our coastal infrastructure. So to that effect, I think the AUKUS countries can be beneficial, and we need to maintain a balance between India and the AUKUS countries at the bilateral level, India and the AUKUS at a minilateral level, and also between Quad and AUKUS. So we need to play these games in order to take advantage of these platforms, infrastructural building platforms. More than that, I think we need to talk about bilateral ventures with the US, with the UK, with Australia. That will be beneficial because all three are big economies. They can invest, and we need a lot of big investments to revamp our flagging initiatives. For example, we have cotton root projects. We have the project Mosam, which is lying for it for some years now. And I think there are spice root projects. So all of these projects, cotton root projects, spice roots projects, and project Mosams, all of these critical projects, they need financial backing. These are maritime oriented ventures projects. They are connectivity projects that is actually going to help India to stay connected with the Indo-Pacific countries. So for all of these projects, we need financial backing. So to that effect, the AUKUS groupings and the Quad platform can be beneficial. So therefore, AUKUS is a welcome initiative for India. Not necessarily it's a welcome initiative for many countries in the regions, but definitely this is a welcome initiative for India and Japan. And there are rooms for India to feel good about it. But at the same time, we cannot afford to compromise on other issues. Now, what are those other issues? There are two critical issues India needs to keep it in mind. We need to keep expanding our networks with France. We need to expand our networks with the European countries, mainstream European countries. France is emerging as a critical defense partner. France is also emerging as a critical economic partner. We cannot neglect on that. So we need to play this dual mode politics to keep our relationship intact with France and also with the mainstream European countries, so including Germany, including Netherlands, including some of the Nordic countries who are actually emerging as a significant partner for India on many issues, including in the skill sector, in the skill development sectors. Some of the Nordic countries are actually critical energy security partners with India. There are good solar partnership emerging between India and Norway, India, Sweden, and that those partnerships cannot be neglected. At the same time, we cannot also afford to neglect our partnership with Russia. We know for a fact that AUKUS is more about China. AUKUS is more about keeping the Chinese activities. AUKUS is also partly meant to keep a tab on the Russian activities. But from India's point of view, we need to stay engaged with Russia, primarily because Russia is a critical defense partner for India, and Russia, we would be needing Russia as a critical security and defense partner in terms of not only to purchase our weapons and arms from the Russians defense industry, but also to maintain a kind of a equal partner, cordial partner with the Eurasian powers. So therefore, we also need to stay engaged with the Eurasian countries, including Russia. So those are my initial thoughts about AUKUS. And I think when it comes to AUKUS expansion, the point that we need to keep it in mind is that I don't think AUKUS expansion is happening in near future, but there is a possibility about AUKUS having more dialogue partnership, dialogue platforms, and having a more plurilateral mechanisms to stay engaged with the powers outside the AUKUS groupings, and therefore there is a scope for India and Japan to stay engaged with AUKUS, and probably to see it more in terms of their national interest. I stop here and probably welcome some of your comments and questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. It was a very enlightening insight on the relevant decoding of the AUKUS, which is the very hot topic right now, and also its implications for India. We have 2 to 3 questions in our chat box. Sir, with your kind permission, if time permits you, then shall we go ahead with them?
Yes, yes,
Only if
yes.
you are convenient to do so.
Yeah,
All right.
please.
So, Chan, would you ask the questions to sir? The questions are already there.
Definitely.
3 participants have asked them. All right.
Definitely. Okay.
Shan, please go ahead. Ask the questions to sir. Thank you.
So the first question to Dr. Panda is from Ridik Parashar, who asks that, sir, how do you assess the Russia-China axis in the midst of this particular development?
I think definitely the Russia-China partnership or their understanding is going to see some momentum because of the AUKUS. Because there was, we know for a fact that between Russia and China, there is a strong partnership when it comes to the Indo-Pacific regions, when it comes to the Eurasian regions. But what we should be mindful about is that there are also issues where there are huge gaps between Russia and China. For example, Russians would never liked that China emerges as a stronger, security partner in the Eurasian regions and trying to capture the Eurasian markets. But what the Chinese are increasingly doing. So therefore, Russians have reasons to worry about. And when we think from the Chinese point of view, the Chinese never want that the Russians should act as a equalizer, because China is emerging as a stronger economic power in the regions. So the Chinese wants to dictate the terms all the times, even within the Shanghai Cooperation Organizations. The Chinese always have tried hard to maintain that edge and try to act as if ASEO belongs to them rather than the Russians. So there are critical gaps between Russia and China, but AUKUS in a way would definitely encourage them to sit down and talk about the areas where they could not only bridge the gap, but also they can extend their partnerships in order to pose a challenge to the AUKUS. So what we will see probably is that there is a greater axis emerging between not only Russia and China, but they would also like to tie ups with many other powers in the regions, be it North Korea, be it Pakistan, and I think they would like to prepare a big umbrella axis in order to challenge the AUKUS. And we have seen just yesterday there has been a statement from both on Russia and China that they are demanding that the UN need to remove the sanctions from the North Korea, so that North Koreans can have economic improvement, and North Korea can actually have a normal life, normal situation within the country. So there is a greater understanding seems to be emerging. But again, I think both Russia and China, they would like to watch the situation about AUKUS closely, how the AUKUS partnership is evolving. But again, yes, they would like to prepare their nexus and try to extend the umbrella, having more serious partnerships evolving in the regions, involving North Korea, involving Pakistan. But again, we know that these are just the initial period. A lot is going to happen probably in times to come.
Thank you, sir. We have just one other question, if time permits you, sir, if I may go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, so this question is from Rima, who asks, what type of nuclear fuel will be used in the SSNs? Will Australia obtain the fuel through purchase or domestic enrichment? And does Australia have the necessary scientific and technical capacity to adequately train submariners?
I think this is a very technical questions. I won't have a exact answer to it, but I think when we're talking about an agreement like AUKUS, all of these nitty-gritties had definitely been discussed between US and Australia. So definitely we have reasons to believe that either Australia has to purchase, or there will be a kind of shared understanding between US, UK, and Australia for Australia to to get the position of this uranium enrichment or the fuel to enrich the submarine capability. So therefore, I think when an agreement of this happens, there is always a roadmap has always been prepared how to meet with the practicalities, how to meet with the nitty-gritties. So therefore, we have reasons to believe that Australia is well prepared to train itself, to train the submarines, and if not, then there will be some nuanced understanding evolving in times to come, where Australia will get the facility to train the submarines when it comes to the enriching, and when it comes to the scientific and technological capacities are concerned.
We had a wonderful session, sir, and I would like to deliver the vote of thanks now. So, on behalf of RLA, I, Shan Chaudhary, would like to extend a heartfelt gratitude to you for such a wonderful session. We're extremely thankful to you for your insights, that you took out some valuable time from your day. And with this, I would like to close this meeting. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining this meeting. And now everyone can sign out of this WebEx meeting. Thank you so much. Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
thank you, Shan. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for joining and agreeing to join. Have a great Diwali ahead, sir. Happy Diwali. Happy Diwali to all. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Thank you, sir.